My next guest, retired U.S. Admiral Mike Mullen, spent 4 decades serving his country, and then he served as President Obama's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he's joining me now live from Annapolis, Maryland. Admiral Mullen, welcome back to the program. So, the word Bakhmut has been on everybody's lips for a long, long time. How do you assess its nature to the prosecution of this war?
Well, I think I basically agree. I don't think strategically, in terms of the progress on the ground, that it's overly significant. But I do think, from both sides, actually, both Ukraine and Russia, that it provides, it's almost symbolic. And it's been 6 or 7 months that the Ukrainians have been fiercely defending Bakhmut, and it's also been obviously that long that the Russians have been attacking it. And one of the things that is just a fact is, because of the effort in defense, the Russians have expended a tremendous amount of resources. They've lost thousands and thousands of soldiers. They've lost an enormous amount of equipment. And so whether tactically it's a huge gain or loss on the ground, I think in terms of impact of the war, it's had a significant impact on what Russia can do. And I think it, in its own way, starts to limit what they can do in other places, for instance, in the South, which is a place you just talked about.
So, Admiral Mullen, you just mentioned something that the NATO has just confirmed, at least an official of NATO's actually talking anonymously, saying that they believe Russia has lost perhaps 5 times as many forces on the ground as Ukraine during this battle for Bakhmut. So, you just explained what that might mean for Russia trying to, secure itself in the south. But also, let's just stick with Ukraine for a second, because you've all described it as pretty much kind of a do or die, and certainly symbolic. You remember President Zelensky went to Bakhmut on the eve of his visit to Congress. He brought back a flag that he said a soldier from Bakhmut gave him to take to the United States. So it's hugely symbolic, and they've lost a lot of people. How will that affect the mindset of commanders and troops if they have to then turn around and launch a counteroffensive somewhere else?
Well, I think knowing what they know in terms of the progress of the battle, and it's a city, I think it's some 70,000, and reports are now there are 4,000 or 5,000 left. And also viewing the photographs of the rubble that Bakhmut has become, which I think is what Putin is trying to do across the country, to ruin as much of the country as possible. It will have its effect. That said, those losses that we described earlier with the Russians are typical of their inability to fight. And I think one of the things, to your point about the counteroffensive, when it comes in the spring, we will find the Ukrainian military much more capable of what we call combined arms training, the coordination of air, artillery, armor. They will have much more armor available to them, if you will, in the Bradleys and the Strykers that are over there. And so I think in the long run, it puts Ukraine in a much better position to fight, to continue the fight. And Russia's given me no indication that they are capable of dramatically changing how they fight while they continue to sustain these huge losses. And I think that will happen in the counteroffensive as well.
So, we again heard from the head of the head of the Wagner Group, who is Prigozhin, who is complaining bitterly, along with his forces, of a lack of ammunition, a lack of shells and the like. But we also know that Ukraine is lacking that. We know that the EU has earmarked $1 billion for 155mm artillery shells, but they haven't got them yet. And you're talking about this spring offensive, which, to be fair, if spring is March 20th, that's just 3 weeks away. Do you think they're ready for an offensive to start that soon?
Well, I think the question is a great question, because in a way, Christian, this fight has evolved into a battle of attrition. And battles of attrition are oftentimes won by the health or lack thereof of the industrial base. So clearly, both sides are focused on this potential shortage of ammunition. And it's really critical, particularly for the Ukrainians, to be very selective about the use of the munitions that they have, because obviously the supply isn't infinite. But you also hear that Russia's having the same problem. So I think everybody's aware of that and the commitments, as well as creating the production lines, which can be a problem as well, which will produce the munitions for the future fight. And I think everybody would like this to end, immediately. Secondly, there's discussions on how it ends. But my sense, Christian, is this counteroffensive and the results of that for the rest of this year will really set the stage for when this ends. And I actually hope that it's sooner rather than later, sometime late this year.
Yeah, and of course, sooner would benefit the Ukrainians because they are less numerous than the Russians. Putin thinks he can outweight the West, and obviously unity and all of this is being tested, right now. I want to ask you a couple of things, to follow up on what you just said. If you were the commander, the battle zone commander now, what would you say Ukraine needs in order to have a successful counteroffensive? What does it need to focus on, and what equipment, training, sophisticated arms systems does it need now?
The Ukrainians have been exceptional in training throughout this fight over the course of the last year, and actually before that. I would argue that a great deal of the training they did between Crimea in 2014 and 2022 has served them exceptionally well. They continue to train, and this combined arms training, I think, that they are going through now will make a significant difference in the future fight. And that's what I would emphasize. And then back that up, obviously, with the weapons and the systems that they need. Many people are chasing the F-16. It's almost like it's a shiny object. And I think eventually we'll get to F-16s for the Ukrainians. But in the meantime, that's not really what they need. They need the kind of artillery, more HIMARS, more precision-guided munitions to be able to strike deep at the Russians and have the kind of impact they've had in the past. That, to me, will, I think, make a huge difference in what happens over the course of the next 6 or 7 months.
Look, let me push back a little bit. You say, and many in the NATO group says that that's not what they need when they talk about fighter jets. But the Leopard tank was a shiny object that was being held back for a long time, and now they are getting them, or at least they're trying to get them as fast as they can. And you all are saying that actually they need that kind of projection of power, etc. So why do you think they don't need aircraft? And what we also have heard is that some Ukrainians are being trained outside, including in the United States, on simulators to figure out, exactly how to furnish them with these fighter jets, whatever they might be. Why do you think they don't need them?
I don't think, I didn't mean to say I don't think they don't need them. I think they will eventually get them. You mentioned the training that is being reported right now. What they really need, and they've actually been very good at this, is they need the air defense systems. And if you go back to very early in the war, the number of Russian aircraft that got shot down in the first couple of months was really extraordinary. So the ability to impact, the Russian aircraft as well. And I recognize that at some point in time, we're going to have to go deeper because there are Russian aircraft launching weapons from inside Russia, which is where we don't want to go. And I just think, Christian, that it's going to take a little more time to develop that capability to get them to a point where the F-16s would be handled in an optimum way. I think they're coming. Obviously not as fast as both President Zelensky and his military would like.